Hello, dear friend. Welcome back to Pentreath Point. It's so lovely to have you here again on this soft, rainy night. Make yourself comfortable. There's nowhere you need to be and nothing you need to do. Let's take a slow breath together. In and out. Feel the softness around you, the warmth, the quiet. Outside, the rain is falling gently, just for you. If thoughts come, let them drift by like clouds over the cove. No need to hold them, just let them pass. You are safe. You are warm. You are home. And now, let's begin tonight's story. There is a particular hour, just after the fishing boats have gone quiet in the harbour, when the light along the Cornish coast turns the colour of weak tea, and Maren Tuck climbs the 102 steps of Pentreath Lighthouse for the last time that day. She knows every step by feel now. The 14th one, worn smooth and slightly hollow in the middle. The 22nd, that creaks if you land on its left edge. The little iron railing, that's cold in a way no other metal in the tower is cold, even in August. She's been the keeper here for 11 years, since her uncle's hands got too stiff for the winding gear, and in that time, she has never once rushed these steps. There is no reason to rush. The sea does not care what time it is. At the top, the lamp room smells of brass polish and the particular oily warmth of the old mechanism, which turns with a sound like someone breathing slowly through their nose. Maren runs her cloth along the glass out of habit more than necessity. It was clean this morning. And she watches, through the salt-hazed pane, the last of the light draining out of the water. Below her, the village of Pentreath is folding itself up for the night. She can see it from here as a scatter of small, warm rectangles. The Anchor pub with its yellow windows. Mrs. Pengelly's cottage, where a curl of chimney smoke rises straight up because there's no wind tonight. The chapel, with its one dim bulb left on over the door, for no one in particular. A dog barks twice, somewhere near the fish market, and then thinks better of it. Maren sits, as she always does at this hour, on the wide stone sill of the lamp room window, her knees drawn up, a mug of milky tea cooling on the ledge beside her. The lamp behind her turns and turns and turns, throwing its long, slow arm of light out over the water, in a rhythm so steady you could set a heartbeat by it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and around, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and around. Out past the harbour wall, where the water goes from green to the deep, unreadable blue of open sea. She watches for the fishing boats coming home late. The Dolly May usually, sometimes the Constance, if the mackerel have been running well past the shoals. Tonight, there's only the dark, and the low mutter of the swell against the rocks below the tower. A sound so constant that after 11 years, Maren has stopped hearing it as sound at all. It has become something closer to silence. A silence with a pulse. She thinks, as she often does at this hour, of nothing in particular. Not tomorrow's chores, not the letter from her sister she still hasn't answered, not the leak in the storeroom roof that will need seeing to before the autumn gales. Just the light turning, and the tea going cold, and the small, warm rectangles of the village settling, one by one, into darkness, like a hand, slowly closing. Her Uncle Corwin taught her the mechanism the summer she turned 19, back when the lamp still ran on paraffin and had to be wound by hand every 4 hours through the night, a great brass key turning a great brass drum, the weight sinking slowly down the centre shaft of the tower, like a very patient clock. He was not a man who explained things twice, and he was not a man who explained things gently, but he was a man who noticed everything, and what he noticed, he taught. "Listen to it before you look at it," he used to say, tapping 2 knuckles against the housing of the lens. "A lighthouse tells you what's wrong before it shows you." And it was true. She had learned, over the years, to hear the difference between the lamp's ordinary hum and the faint catch in its rhythm that meant a bearing wanted oil. The difference between wind against glass and wind finding a gap it shouldn't have found. The tower spoke to her in small sounds, the way an old house speaks to the people who have lived in it long enough to stop being surprised by its voice. He had been a keeper for 34 years before her, and his father 41 years before that. And there was a photograph in the little office at the base of the tower. She keeps it there still, in a frame gone soft and freckled with damp at the corners, of 3 generations of Tucks standing in front of the lighthouse door in 1958, squinting into a sun none of them could have known would still be shining on this same stretch of coast, on this same white tower, 60-some years later. Corwin used to say the lighthouse didn't belong to the Tucks. The Tucks belonged to the lighthouse. Maren didn't understand what he meant until years after he'd said it, on a night much like this one, with the light turning behind her and the village going dark below. When she realised she could not actually picture her life anywhere else. Not really. Not in any way that felt true. He lives now in a small cottage 2 streets back from the harbour, close enough that she can see his kitchen window if she leans out just right from the gallery outside the lamp room. And most evenings, if the weather's decent, a lamp comes on in that window, at almost exactly the hour her own lamp begins its first slow turn. She has never asked him if he does this on purpose. She likes not knowing. She likes that some things between people don't need to be spoken to be understood. Her mother had not been a Tuck by birth, and never quite made her peace with the tower the way the rest of the family had. She'd married into it, as the local phrase went, the way you might marry into a family business or a family debt. And for the first few years, she'd climbed the 102 steps dutifully alongside Corwin's brother, carrying up sandwiches and flasks of soup on the nights he kept the long watch, before deciding, in the end, that she loved the man far more than she loved the building he seemed married to as well. She used to say the tower was jealous. She meant it half as a joke, but only half. "It doesn't like sharing him," she'd tell Maren, when Maren was small enough to be told things like that and believe them completely. "And it won't like sharing you either, if you let it." She'd said this, Maren remembers, on the beach below Gull's Cove one particular summer, both of them sitting with their feet in water gone warm from a whole day of sun, the tower visible in the distance as a small white pencil against the sky. And Maren remembers not quite understanding what her mother meant, only that there was something in her voice that wasn't entirely playful. Her mother left Pentreath eventually, not dramatically, Not in any way the village gossiped about for long. Simply a slow drift outward, a job in Truro, then a flat, then a life that had less and less room in it, for a man who spent half his nights on a rock a mile out from anywhere. Maren was 12. She stayed with her father, and more as the years went on, with Corwin, who never said an unkind word about his sister-in-law's leaving. Only that some people were built for lighthouses, and some people weren't. And that it wasn't a fault in either direction, only a fact. The way some people are built for cities, and some for quiet. And there's no particular virtue in either shape, only in knowing which one you are. Maren thinks of her mother sometimes on nights like this, without any great sadness, the way you might think of a person from a photograph, fondly, a little distantly, glad to have known them, not especially inclined to reach for the phone. They speak twice a year, at Christmas and on Maren's birthday. And her mother always asks, in the same slightly careful tone, whether she's happy up there, all alone with the birds and the weather. And Maren always says yes, because it's true, and because she has stopped trying to explain the particular shape of the happiness to someone who was never built to feel it the same way. She wonders, occasionally, whether her mother was right about the tower being jealous. She doesn't think it's jealousy, exactly. She thinks it's more like this. Some things ask for the whole of you, not because they're greedy, but because giving the whole of yourself to one steady thing is its own kind of freedom, a freedom her mother never wanted. And Maren, somehow, always has. The tea has gone properly cold now, and Maren drinks it anyway, because there is a particular kind of comfort in a cold cup of tea at the end of a long day. Something about the way it asks nothing further of you. You don't have to blow on it. You don't have to wait. It simply is what it is, and you drink it. And that's the whole of the transaction. Down in the harbour, a single boat is coming in. She can tell by the small green light bobbing at the stern, rising and falling with the swell, in a rhythm slightly out of time with her own lamps turning, so that every so often the two lights seem to catch each other and then drift apart again, like two people trying and failing to dance to the same song. It'll be the Dolly May. It's always the Dolly May this late. Old Ives Bartle at the wheel, working the mackerel grounds long after the younger fishermen have given up and gone home to their suppers. She watches the boat's slow progress toward the harbour mouth for a long while. Not because there's any need to. The Dolly May has come home past dark 1,000 times, and Ives Bartle knows these waters better than he knows his own hands. But because there is something soothing in watching a small, steady thing make its way home across a large, dark space. The boat doesn't hurry. It simply keeps coming. A little green light rising and falling, until at last it slips behind the harbour wall and out of sight. And she hears, faintly, the flat metal clang of it coming alongside the quay. Home safe, she thinks. The way she thinks it every night a boat comes in this late, and she doesn't know why the thought settles her chest the way it does, only that it always has, ever since she was small enough to watch this same window from her uncle's shoulders. Let your own shoulders drop now, if they haven't already. You don't need to hold anything up tonight. Not your thoughts, not your plans for tomorrow. not the small worries that like to gather at the edges of a quiet room. Let them settle, the way the village is settling below the tower, window by window, room by room, until there is only the dark and the slow turning of a light that asks nothing of you at all. By 10 o'clock the wind has picked up a little, coming in off the water with the particular salt and iodine smell of a sea that's been turned over by something out past the horizon. A low weather system Maren heard about on the radio 2 days ago. Expected to graze the coast sometime after midnight and be gone again by morning. Nothing serious. Nothing the tower hasn't weathered 10,000 times before. She goes down the 102 steps, slower going down than coming up, always. Her uncle taught her that too. Going down is where people get careless. To check the storm shutters on the ground floor windows, more out of ritual than necessity, since the forecast called for nothing worse than a stiff blow and some rain. The stone stairwell holds the day's warmth a little longer than the outside air, and there's a particular hush to it, the sound of her own footsteps, swallowed up by walls 4 feet thick in places, laid by men whose names are barely legible now on the foundation stone. In the little kitchen at the base of the tower, really just a kettle, a 2-ring stove, a table scarred with the initials of keepers going back to before the war. She puts the kettle on again, because there is no version of a long night that doesn't benefit from a fresh pot of tea. And while it heats, she stands at the small window and watches the wind start to worry at the sycamore behind the old boathouse, its leaves turning silver side up, the way they do before rain. The rain, when it comes gently at first, a scatter of drops against the glass, widely spaced, almost polite about it, before settling into the steadier rhythm of a proper coastal rain, the kind that doesn't so much fall as simply arrive, all at once, everywhere. A grey curtain drawn across the whole bay. She can hear it on the roof 3 floors up, a soft, continuous static. And she can hear it on the water below the tower, a different sound entirely, 1,000 small percussions, swallowed instantly by a much larger one. She makes the tea. She carries it back up the 102 steps, slower again, the mug warm against her palm, and by the time she reaches the lamp room, the rain has found its full voice, streaming down the outside of the glass in long, trembling ropes that catch the lamp's light and throw strange, bright threads across the walls, each time the beam swings past. There was a storm, years ago now, the winter Maren turned 23, that she still measures other storms against, the way people measure winters against the hardest one they remember. It had come up fast off the Atlantic, faster than the forecasters had promised, and by 9 in the evening, the wind had climbed to something that made the whole tower hum faintly at a pitch she'd never heard it hum at before. A low vibration she could feel through the soles of her boots, even 3 floors up. And Corwin, still keeper then, though his hands had already begun to trouble him, had climbed up to sit with her, rather than leave her alone with it. The 2 of them watching sheets of spray come clean over the harbour wall, 40 feet up, and hang there a moment in the lamp's beam like something briefly solid, before the wind tore it apart again. Neither of them had said very much that night. There hadn't been much to say. You didn't talk over a storm like that so much as sit inside it. The two of them wedged into the old chairs with mugs going cold in their hands, watching the mechanism keep its rhythm even as the whole building shuddered around it. And at some point past midnight, in a lull between the worst of the gusts, Corwin had said, without looking away from the window, "This is the only conversation worth having with weather like this. You don't argue with it. You just keep the light on and let it say what it needs to say." The Dolly May had been out that night, Ives Bartle younger then and stubborn about it, and Maren remembers the particular quality of relief, sharp enough to feel almost like pain, when the little green light finally appeared far out past the harbour mouth, pitching wildly, taking nearly 40 minutes to cover a distance that would normally take 10, and how she and Corwin had both stood at the window without speaking, until the boat was safely behind the wall, and how Corwin had let out a breath afterward that told her, more than any words could have, exactly how frightened he'd been, underneath his steadiness, the whole time. Tonight's storm is nothing like that one, and she's grateful for it, though she notices, listening to the milder wind work at the shutters below, that some small, watchful part of her measures every storm this way now, against that one. The way you can't help measuring a scar against the wound that made it. The tower remembers storms the way people do, she thinks. Not with fear exactly, but with a kind of respect that doesn't fade, tucked into the walls themselves, along with 140 years of salt and weather and steadiness. There is nothing so fine, she has always thought, as being warm and dry inside a small stone room while a great deal of weather happens loudly on the other side of a very good window. The rain doesn't concern her. The wind, gusting now hard enough to make the old iron weather vane on the roof groan faintly on its spindle, doesn't concern her either. The tower has stood through worse than this 100 times over, and she has read enough of the old keeper's logs, kept in a locked cabinet in the office, going back to 1887 in a dozen different hands. Some copperplate and careful, some cramped and hurried, to know exactly what worse looks like. And this isn't it. She settles into the old wooden chair beside the mechanism, the one with the cushion gone flat and shiny with age, and pulls a blanket from the shelf where she keeps one folded for exactly this purpose, and lets the sound of the rain and the wind and the slow turning of the lamp become, all together, a kind of weather of their own, one she is entirely inside of, and entirely safe from, both at once. Somewhere below, muffled by 3 floors of stone, she can hear the sea working itself into a slightly rougher mood against the rocks. The swell arriving in longer, heavier sets now, each one landing with a soft, deep thud she feels more than hears, a sensation that travels up through the foundation and into the soles of her feet, where they rest on the cold stone floor. It is not an alarming sound. It is, if anything, the opposite. A reminder that the tower has roots, that it is built into the rock itself rather than simply resting on top of it. That whatever the sea decides to do tonight, it has been deciding to do the same thing, more or less, for longer than anyone has been keeping records. The rocks below the tower all have names, given by fishermen so long ago that nobody remembers who first said them, only that everyone has said them ever since. There's the Widow, a jagged black spur just west of the harbour mouth that shows only at the lowest tides, said to have taken more small boats than any other rock along this stretch of coast, though Maren privately suspects that reputation, like most reputations, has grown taller in the telling. There's the 3 sisters, a cluster of rounded boulders further out, always together, always visible even at high water, so that generations of local sailors have used them to judge their distance from shore on foggy days, when the tower itself couldn't be trusted to appear when expected. There's Church Rock, flat-topped and solitary, named for its faint resemblance to a pulpit, where cormorants gather most mornings and stand with their wings held out to dry, like small, dark preachers addressing a congregation of waves. Her uncle knew all their names and all their moods. The way he knew the names and moods of most things along this coast. And he taught them to Maren the summer she was learning the mechanism, walking her along the cliff path at low tide and pointing with his whole arm at each one in turn, insisting she repeat the names back to him until she had them by heart. A keeper who doesn't know the rocks is only half a keeper, he told her. The light shows the way. You have to know why the way matters. She thinks of this now, listening to the sea work at those same rocks in the dark below her, each one taking the swell in its own particular fashion. The widow with a sharp crack and hiss. The three sisters with a duller, rounder thud. Church Rock with almost no sound at all. The water simply climbing its flat face and sliding back down again without complaint. She couldn't see any of them right now, even with the lamp's help, not with the rain still falling. But she doesn't need to see them to know exactly where they are, exactly what they're doing. The way you don't need a light on to know the layout of a room you've lived in your whole life. There's a comfort in that kind of knowing, she thinks. Not the comfort of certainty, exactly, since the sea can still surprise you, still does now and again. But the comfort of familiarity so deep, it no longer needs to announce itself. The rocks are there. The names are there. The sea does what it has always done to both, and the tower keeps doing what it has always done in answer. And somewhere in that long, patient exchange between water and stone and light, Maren has found the only kind of certainty she's ever really wanted. If your eyes have started to feel heavy, there's no need to fight that. Let them close and keep listening. The rain doesn't need you to watch it to keep falling. The light doesn't need you awake to keep turning. Everything in this story will still be here, going quietly about its business, whether you're following along with your eyes open or drifting off somewhere in the middle of a sentence.